So if you have been wondering what the hell is going on in the world, you might find this update quite useful. So this is my usual month ahead forecast, where I look right the way through the month and break it down on a week by week basis. At the start of this, I'll be looking at the, I guess, metrics of it, talking about which weeks are the busiest. Are there a few days here and a few days there that we need to watch out for? So I'll be giving you those heads ups and kind of alerts on that. And then I'm also going to be looking at, have we got planets that are moving signs? What's in retrograde, what's coming out of retrograde, and then also the quality of the connections between the planets. Is this a month whereby we've got lots of oppositions, or is this more heavy on squares or trines, for instance? So all of that will be revealed very, very shortly. In the second part, I'm going to break down the week by week and give a forecast. So if you do want a bit of a forecast for the month ahead, then really do listen in the second part where I do week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, really giving the overall theme. Obviously, I will go even deeper into that in my week ahead forecast, which I do most weeks. I skipped a week recently when I was ill, but they're there to help you. And those ones I also break down on a horoscope basis, so sign by sign. But this is overview, and it's to give you really what you need to know about the month ahead. And are things going to get a bit crazy? What's going to happen? So yeah, a big one. Before I get going, I just want to say thank you to everybody that sponsors this channel and supports me as a creator. I really, really appreciate you. This list is growing slowly but surely. And whether you're supporting me with your treasure, your time, your own talent, and your own comments, however you're helping the channel, I really, really appreciate you. So these are all the people that have given me a donation or a bit of encouragement. And yeah, I absolutely honor you. Thank you so much. You're an important part of this community. Thank you. So let's have a look at November then. So as I said, I'm going to be going through week 1, 2, 3, and 4 later on in much greater detail. In this bit, I just want to tell you, this is what I've said about each week, like what I think it's going to be providing us with. So I really think the first week, from literally the 1st of November, which is coming up in a couple of days, right the way through to the 7th, it's about getting into our own groove. It's really, really dynamic, and it's going to get us moving, and I think it's going to help us get really real about what we value, what we don't value. It's really helping us to get back into our own style. Week 2, I think is a week where we're feeling a bit cold and disconnected. It's got a bit of insecurity. It's got the sort of disconnect from person to person. To me, it feels a little bit like we're out in the cold. We feel a little bit lost. For various reasons, and they might not be political. Obviously, I know that something like 40% of people that watch me are from the United States. So, I'm sure there's a lot going on for you. But, just before I started recording, I heard that the budget in the UK is about to really shock people. So there's all sorts of stuff going on in all parts of the world at the moment. But week 2 to me feels like a time when we might need a bit of extra support. And also it would be a time when it would be good for us to resource ourselves, like look after ourselves. Like if you knew you were, going to maybe go off on your own or have a little bit of reflection time, what might you need ahead of time to help you feel comfortable? Then week 3, I really see things moving again. It's very tense. There's a lot of disruptions. And then week 4, I see that things are slowly coming back into a particular shape. To me, it feels like things are norming, like there is a new normal. And when I said, oh, there is a new normal, it instantly took me back to the time of, the start of COVID, the start of the COVID phenomenon, as we all might remember it. There was so much messaging about, oh, this is the new normal, this is a new normal. And it just seemed that every new normal that was coming up was getting crapper and crapper from my perspective, that is. However, I do feel like there's this sense of, okay, here's the new normal, and now we are getting ready to adjust to that new normal. And I also see there's a lot of healing. So maybe week 4 has a certain amount of acceptance. It's also a time of centering, where we really need to center. Now, I've broken it down a little bit more. You'll notice that I put these 2 weeks in yellow. I've highlighted those because they are the absolute 2 busiest weeks. And then I've also looked to see if there were some times when there were a couple of days that looked very, very intense. And the biggest part of this month, I think, is from the 1st to the 4th of November. So it's literally just upon us. I really see that this getting into your own groove and this like boom energy is also about big personal changes and bold steps forward. I think there is a shift going on right now. The next big period that I think is important is in week 3, between the 17th and the 19th of November. I do think that's also got a full moon in it. And this one has got the new moon in it, by the way. But I see that the 17th to the 19th in particular, it's ongoing theme, even though it's in a week of movement and disruptions, it's got a feeling of moving on and moving up, and that maybe tensions can bring out the best in us. And then the last is happening in week 4 on the 27th to 28th. To me, it feels like we've got difficult relationships, but we're coming up with confident solutions. So I guess what I'm really saying there is nothing is impossible. We can shift and move beyond stuff. So let's go a little bit deeper and talk about the ingresses, i.e. when the planets are changing signs, and also retrogrades. So on the 2nd, and this is another reason why the 1st to the 4th is so dynamic, is because on the 2nd of November, which is happening this week, I'm recording this on the 30th of October, we've got Mercury going into the sign of Sagittarius. Mercury is not happy in the sign of Sagittarius. It's pretty weak in the sign of Sagittarius, and I'm saying that as somebody with it natally in the sign of Sagittarius. When Mercury is in the sign of Sagittarius, we do get a little bit campaigny. We're like wanting to talk about issues, and it's all very contextual and not necessarily very much based on actual facts. It's talking about bigger pictures, and its descriptions might be a bit woolly. So Mercury's not that very comfortable in the sign of Sagittarius, but it's interesting. It's a fire sign, because then 2 days later, Mars is also changing signs and going into the sign of Leo, another fire sign. So yeah, the 2nd and the 4th are really bringing in a very sort of personal fire. Like Mercury is about our belief systems and not so much our belief systems, sorry, how our mind thinks and how we communicate, and also, how we might be communicating, not as in our words, but where we might be doing it. So, you might be doing it on social media, which is a very sort of Sagittarius place, by the way. And Sagittarius is known for being a bit careless, and also, sometimes maybe like standing on people's feet, like being a bit sort of clumsy with what you're saying. And so this Mercury in Sagittarius time could be quite devastating for some people. You might be a bit tactless, or somebody might be around you very tactless, but the Sagittarius energy, which is fiery, and it's also expansive, and it's also optimistic, and it's also sometimes a bit overconfident, that could absolutely push communications to the limit for a lot of people. Mars going into Leo. Now Mars is I think very much about our physical strength and our ability to create vitality for ourselves and to defend ourselves if we need to. Mars is, I think, really, I think it's our empowerment at some level. And the sign of Leo is very, very proud. It's another fire sign. It's a fixed fire sign. So, I think people are going to be very proud of where they are. And possibly very fixed about where they are, and also where they're drawing their lines, because Mars does draw boundaries. Mars, Mars is very independent and like makes his own decision. Mars isn't necessarily about sharing. Mars is about doing. Mars isn't about yielding. It's about moving forwards with independence and with will and energy. So Mars in the sign of fixed fire, Leo, I think could create some very sort of proud eruptions from people, and then Mercury and Sagittarius, mixed in, this is very, very dynamic. And of course, this is happening immediately before the American elections, if they go ahead, because, there's so many different things going on right now. Who knows how it's going to go? Yeah. And then we've also got on the 11th, we've got Venus going into Capricorn, which means, whereas Venus right now, she's also in the sign of Sagittarius. So, for the first 10 days of November, you've got personal planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, all in fire signs. Now, from the 11th, when Venus goes into Capricorn, I think we might be relating to people on slightly more formal terms. We might be a bit more reserved. We might be less flighty. We might be a bit more serious. And we might appreciate the company of older people, people who we trust, people who we know are serious in their energy. I think, we're coming into a time when we're going to appreciate the seriousness of people around us. And one of the things about the Sagittarius energy is it's absolutely seeking for truth. The sign of Sagittarius, it can get distracted and titillated by stuff. But ultimately, I think the archer's arrow, as it goes up, it's shooting high. It is looking for the empirical truth, not the factual truth as like the sort of Gemini energy, which is black and white, but the sort of empirical, the felt truth, the known truth, the intuitive truth, and also like the I don't know, like I can't quite describe it, but like the greater context. Maybe not so much truth, maybe, but what's right, So there is this kind of pioneer energy. And then I think as Venus goes into Capricorn, we might be more fixed with what's practical rather than what's right. We're mostly thinking, okay, let's get practical, let's get serious, let's get to the hard work or nice work of connecting again and being like humans around each other. And then on the 19th, Pluto is going into Aquarius for the last time in our lifetimes, no doubt. This is the third time that Pluto has ingressed into the sign of Aquarius. This is a big deal. It's not going to go back to Capricorn. So, again, I would say, what's Pluto doing before then? So from the start of November up until the 19th, Pluto in Capricorn is still trying to make himself felt. And that is the corporate, the big business, the big government, the behind the scenes rulers of everything. Like Pluto got very, very powerful in Capricorn. And anyone that was really wanting to be quite secretive, which is a very much a Pluto thing, secretive and powerful, would have absolutely loved this Pluto in Capricorn time, because Capricorn has this habit of amalgamating things and making things so much bigger, and not working necessarily with the people and each other, but kind of working in secret very much for themselves. Pluto can have so much self-interest. And obviously we've all got Pluto somewhere in our charts. And, very recently in my last weekly forecast, I really spoke about, the lengths the Pluto side of us will go to have its own way. So, Pluto has been having its own way by amassing power, like really big power, but not power that you can see, power that is secret. That's the one that you should be worried about, not the stuff you can see. It's the power that you can't see. The secret power that is behind everything around the world. And so whatever is in charge, whatever is at the top, it's got until the 19th when Pluto changes signs. And then the power quest is going to come up in a whole new direction, in terms of raising everything for everybody. Now I've recorded a couple of different videos about Pluto and Aquarius. I think the first one was back in March of 2023. And then I recorded another one in January of 2024, the last two ingresses. So they are there to listen to, and you might have already seen some of these changes coming in. The sign of Aquarius has so many themes about liberalism and and like diversity and how we can create equal outcomes or helpful outcomes. Now, some people call it equity rather than equal, so there's a whole new kind of dictionary of words and terms and ways of being that are going to come up in this Pluto and Aquarius time. Now, we've already seen that happen, and of course Saturn actually led the way. Saturn went into Aquarius back in, oh crikey, it was on my birthday, wasn't it? 20th of December, was it 21st of December 2021 or 2020? I can't remember the exact time, but this is off the top of my head, that's why I can easily research it. But Saturn went into Aquarius and started bringing a lot of these ideas in, and then Pluto has been flirting with these ideas and bringing more of them in. From the 19th, it's going to start to come in at a greater level, and things like AI, how power, which is a Pluto theme, can be shared equally, or everyone can have access to it. But the sign of Aquarius has so much more about like databases and shared intel. So I do think, the way social media has changed and how news has changed. People aren't getting their news from traditional news reports anymore. They're getting their news from like independent journalists, and they're getting their news from each other. It's like we are decentralizing. There is a whole decentralizing process going on right now, and I think as Pluto comes into Aquarius, we're really going to see that come on. So how does that fit in with the overall theme? Who knows? And then a couple of days later, on the 21st, the sun goes into Sagittarius, and I for one will go because right now the sun is in Scorpio, and it is deep, it is dark, we're going through some really big shifts, and yes, when the sun changes signs and goes into the sign of Sagittarius, I think things will the sort of beat, the rhythm that we're going through, it will change. We'll have a new rhythm. So now, last month we had a lot of retrogrades. This was the most heaviest retrograde month. I think in between the 8th and the 11th in particular, we had like as much as, like the biggest retrograde moment. Now we've got Jupiter retrograde all month. Saturn starts off retrograde but goes direct from the 16th. That will be helpful. Things will get moving. Saturn, very much a theme in terms of authority, in terms of governments, in terms of laws and things like that. So from the 16th of November, anything that's administrative, hopefully, will start to move again. Uranus is retrograde all month. Neptune is retrograde all month. Chiron is retrograde all month. And then Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius is going to go retrograde on the 25th of November, I think until the 15th of December. At 22 degrees in the sign of Sagittarius. So Mercury retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius is going to be interesting because, like I said right at the start of this slide, Mercury is not strong in Sagittarius. It's more about stories and context and the overall stories that help humanity, like that keep us connected. It's less about facts and more about quality. But like Mercury is looking at information, not quality stories or the hopeful elements of connection. So this is going to be interesting when it goes retrograde, because he's already struggling in the sign of Sagittarius. Doesn't mean he's going to struggle more, or is it going to actually reverse and actually feel a bit easier? I'll talk about this actually closer to the time. So let's look at some other ways that the energy is being shared in this month ahead. So we've only got one conjunction. Obviously, the moon is making conjunctions all month to all the planets. But, in terms of big conjunctions, like I said, I wasn't going to look so much at the moon energies. But the new moon in Scorpio is the big one. And that's on the 1st of November. And that is absolutely harnessing all of the Scorpio energy. I released a video about the new moon in Scorpio earlier today. So if you're fascinated by that, please do watch that. That will be very helpful. Now you'll see that there's a ton of trines, which I think is really, really helpful, because even though there's, planetary changes in particular, that Pluto going into Aquarius finally, And the fact that Pluto is no longer retrograde is also very helpful. Like Pluto is one of the themes of Scorpio, like Pluto is one of the rulers. And so, the Pluto theme is always very strong at this time of year. So it's great to hear that there are these supporting trines. Now, we've got some oppositions. Now, you might know already that Mars is in an opposition to Pluto, which I think is absolutely adding to the drama of these times, because Mars is also a ruler of Scorpio. It depends if you're a traditional or a modern day astrologer, as to which you think is more important. Personally, I consider both. I think Mars and Pluto really represent different aspects of Scorpio, but they're pulled apart right now. And they're not just pulled apart for, 4 or 5 days like they normally are. They're pulled apart pretty much for 6 months, and they're going to be exactly in an opposition 3 times. So this is particularly difficult in terms of understanding what is our will to live and our will to thrive versus when we're using control and power to benefit ourselves over other people. There's a very big difference between doing something for yourself versus doing something for yourself that might harm or inconvenience others. And I really get that with Pluto. So this is a very big one. We've also got an opposition of the benefics, Venus in an opposition to Jupiter. Later on, I think this is on the day of the full moon. In fact, the full moon should be on here as well. I didn't put that in, but Sun in an opposition to Uranus is big. And we've also got on the 18th a Mercury opposition to Jupiter, which, given that Mercury is in Jupiter's sign of Sagittarius in this month ahead, this is also adding to this. This is happening before Mercury goes retrograde. So, really, really interesting. And they're both in mutual reception, so Jupiter is in Mercury's sign of Gemini, and Mercury is in one of Jupiter's signs, Sagittarius. So this is, fabulously interesting to look at. And I do think it's going to bring up a certain amount of frustration. And then we've got these squares, Venus square Neptune. I'm talking about this in the week ahead forecast in particular, next week's one. Mercury Saturn square is pretty strong. Venus square the North Node, Venus square Chiron. So you'll see that Venus is the one that's really making the squares in this month ahead. And of course, if Venus represents our ability to connect with each other and relate to each other, then that is really going to be having an effect on our relationships in this month ahead. Square Neptune, what can we trust? Can we trust what's going on? Square the North Node, like do we really feel like we're on the right timeline anymore? Does it, how can we relate to the times we're in? And then square Chiron, it feels painful. And something is being brought up for us to heal and look at. But then let's just pay some attention to the trines as well. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Mercury trines. We've got a Venus trine, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Sun trines. I should say Mars is also in there because both the Sun and Mercury are making a trine to Mars. But if you think of the Mercury and the Sun energy as being the main trine planets in this month ahead, until Mercury goes retrograde, Mercury is there as a communicator. He's there to communicate what's going on. He's bringing messages from the gods or the afterlife or the afterworld, the other world, from other realms, especially given the time that we're in right now at the end of October, beginning of November. But, Mercury is a messenger. So I do think the messages will come very smoothly. There are plenty of messages coming up in this month ahead. There's a lot of information. And do we trust it? Do we have to, what really comes up for me is, who are we happy to have our information from? Because I think we're living in times where, if we don't like the person that's the messenger, we might just absolutely discount this information. Seeing all these Mercury trines like the North Node, trine Mars, trine Neptune, and also trine Chiron. I think there are some very powerful and helpful messages coming in, but given that he's in the sign of Sagittarius, and he's not very strong, we might be taking messages from people we don't normally listen to. We might be getting information from sources that we don't normally trust, but all of a sudden, we're widening our scope. We're maybe not being so narrow-minded, and definitely that's one of the benefits of the Sagittarian energy, actually, is that we will focus on so much more information. So I love that. The sun trine Saturn, trine Neptune, trine the North Node, trine Mars. I think that's very helpful. All of those are very deeply helpful, helping us feel more mature and act in a more mature way. Maybe realize that we're all responsible for the situations we find ourselves in. With the sun in a trine to Neptune, we're trying to understand things and understand things with forgiveness and compassion. I see that as being very helpful. The sun trine the North Node, I think, is us getting back on track and feeling a little bit more excited. And the sun in a trine to Mars, that's us moving on. That's us saying, okay, well, you know what? The world can do its own crazy thing. And yes, I'm in the world and the world affects me. And yet I could put my life on hold for a really long time, trying to wait for everything else to sort itself out. Or I could also decide to just get on and live my life. And so I really see that coming in right at the end on the 27th, when the sun makes a trine to Mars. So I think that's all very helpful. So these are the biggest dates again, as I see them, which might be useful to take a note of and put in your diary. The 1st to the 4th of November, which I've said are big personal changes, bold steps forward. I mean, essentially, we've got a Mercury trine Neptune, the new moon in Scorpio, Jupiter sextile Chiron, Mercury trine Mars. All of these are really, really big. Mercury sextile Pluto, Mercury into Sagittarius, Mars opposite Pluto, Venus opposite Jupiter, Venus trine Chiron, Mars into Leo, Sun trine Saturn. I mean, this is intense, such an intense 4 days. Not only have you got the new moon in Scorpio, and also 2 planet changes, Mercury and Leo, which is enough just to set things really moving. But we've got that Mars opposition Pluto and Venus opposition Jupiter on the same day. To me, it feels like you're moving forwards, but also really challenged in your thinking, challenged, in terms of getting back in your body, really getting clear about what's yours and what's not yours, getting clear where you might be manipulative or where you might be manipulated. And then, Mercury trine Neptune, Mercury trine Mars are, I think, really getting us to think and actually want to talk about things and be a bit more open about things. Venus trine Chiron, I think, is us really wanting to kind of get a sense of healing. And then Sun trine Saturn is us, I think, growing up. So, I do think we can boldly step forwards in those days, but it's not easy. I think we're going to get quite exhausted by, the amount of aspects. These 4 days, could be spread out over the whole month and we'd still go through some big changes. So the 1st to the 4th is big. It really wouldn't surprise me if something big is going down before the election, just because there's just so much going on. 17th to the 19th then, again, where is that full moon? I'm sure it is on there somewhere. I need to just check this 1 second. I was mistaken. Actually, the full moon's on the 15th. I just needed to check. When I'm like going through all sorts of dates and working with different people, sometimes I lose track. So, so the 17th to 19th is a couple of days on from the full moon. And that full moon also does have some relevance to the Sun opposition Uranus energy that's going on the 17th. So Uranus is involved for sure with the full moon. But the Sun opposition Uranus and also Pluto going into Aquarius are really, really strong and edgy, really strong and edgy. Mars in a trine to the North Node is us getting moving. Mercury opposite Jupiter is stimulating and possibly bringing up, a sense of othering, between people. The Sun trine Neptune is useful. Mercury trine Chiron is useful. So, I think these useful ones are bringing out the best in us. We are moving on, we are moving up. But again, there are some sort of challenging scenarios. And then the 27th, 28th, I think, we've got Sun trine Mars, Venus square Chiron. We might be feeling out of odds, with people around us. And yet our will to get on and our will to understand each other and be sort of practical is the thing, I think, that is going to get us through. I heard something earlier, about how we could, maybe even have different views in life, maybe in terms of the Americans, that we might vote for different people and yet still be able to just say, oh, okay, come on, let's go and get a beer. There was a time when we were living through, where we were in life, where we could have a different view about things, but still get on. And I really noticed around the time of the COVID phenomenon that to me, that felt like, one of the first really strong times where polarity consciousness seemed more important than the sanctity and healthiness of us all just getting on, so all of a sudden people were pitted against each other and blaming each other and othering all the time. And so what I really hope to see is by the 27th, 28th, if not everyone, that, people are starting to say, look, we need to just get on, because if we cannot find a way to get beyond how we are, where our positions are, we're screwed. Like humanity really won't get on, when half of them are diametrically opposed to the other. You can't obliterate people that you don't like. You just can't do that. We need to find a way to get on. And actually, as we find ways to get on with each other, that will be the thing that brings us back to life, brings us back to a place of solutions, so that we don't have to, wait for someone on high to say, oh, this is what's going to happen now. In fact, we'll be doing it for ourselves. And I think that's actually much more important, is that we can come into our own sense of peace with each other, and start building the kind of world we want. We don't need permission from people to build a world. If we're all in alignment with each other, it will naturally happen. But, I'm an optimistic Sagittarius. So anyway, let's have a look. So this is, I think, where I'm going to get into the forecast. So week 1 then, this is the one that I've called Get Into Your Own Groove. Boom. So the 1st of November is a very, very big day. Like I said, the new moon in Scorpio, I've done a forecast about that already, but this is essentially a time when we are creating a sense of direction. It's a seed point. It's the opportunity to decide how you want to be powerful, how you want to express your power, how you want to express intimacy and trust and build loyalty. Because again, Scorpio is a very good secret keeper. Scorpios can be trusted, I think. So there is a new start that could be very, very powerful on the 1st. And with Mercury in a trine to Neptune, that's bringing out a lot of imagination, spiritual imagination, the opportunity to tune right into your best good. And straight after it, we've got Jupiter in a sextile to Chiron, which I think is a really deep and beautiful and healing aspect. Jupiter in a sextile to Chiron is really allowing us to feel faithful in what we're healing, and to faithfully want to bring in a sense of hope and optimism into the idea of healing ourselves, healing our communities, healing our family. There is something very beautiful. To me, it feels like teaching energy, we're optimistic, we are expanding, and we're also being compassionate. We're also listening to things. If you're not in a situation where you can be healed, or you're not in a situation where you're like necessarily around people. Jupiter sextile Chiron, I think, could give you the missing pieces as to what is disconnecting you, you know, what you might need to feel like you're coming back into your own life again. So Jupiter sextile Chiron, I think, is very, very useful. They're my top like 3 at the start of this week. Then we got Mercury in a trine to Mars. It goes exact. And we got this lovely Mercury, Neptune and Mars trine. You know, this is really helpful. You know, we are getting into our voices. We're able to articulate. We're also able to dream together. You know, I do think this is, you know, helpful if you are trying to pull a consensus, you know, within your community, if you're trying to get on with each other and find new ways to interact with each other. I think this is very, very healing and very beneficial. Mercury is also in a sextile to Pluto, and then Mercury goes into Sagittarius. So again, the sextile to Pluto, we are able to access a really sort of transformational way of thinking about things. And then we're about to open up our minds to a much more sort of philosophical way of being. And then the third is a very sort of, the third to the fourth is very, very intense. And I've spoken about this in my week ahead forecast already, but I think the sort of headline is on Sunday, the 3rd of November, you know, we may come across a lot of opposition. We may be doing it with ourselves. We might feel very opposed in ourselves. You know, we might be thinking, how can I get what I want? How can I make it happen? And that's the Pluto side talking. And then there's the Mars side, which is like, what action do I need to take to be clear about what I want? And I really think the Mars energy is the one that's going to really help heal us, as opposed to the Pluto energy, which in that opposition wants to get its own way. So it's almost like we've got this, you know, a sort of balancing act in terms of will and what we want. So I do think on Sunday the 3rd, we could get very frustrated with each other. And whilst it looks like we're frustrated with each other, actually what's going on is we're going on in sort of internal battle ourselves. Venus opposition to Jupiter, you know, that can also make us very, very ungrounded. You know, Venus and Jupiter are both benefics. They're both quite expanded. They're both wanting to relate, and they're both wanting to feel good. And yet they're going in different ways, you know, which kind of topples you over if you've got one foot going one way and another foot going the other. You know, there is a sort of ungroundedness and an over optimism. It's a funny set of energies on that day. And then on the 3rd as well, we've also got Venus in a trine to Chiron, which is lovely. So we've had Jupiter in a sextile to Chiron, Venus in a trine to Chiron. You know, the healing themes are coming up. We are really wanting to make a difference. I really do believe everyone right now is wanting to do a good thing, and to help heal what they feel is wrong. And of course, as it appears in the media, there are like 2 main ways of thinking things have come apart at the seams, and they appear to be diametrically opposed. I still maintain, as I've maintained throughout all of this year, that underneath our views, you know, most people are wanting security, most people are wanting love, most people are wanting connection, and we've been seconded into a way of believing, because of our childhoods and because of our issues and because of the things we've experienced, you know. And if we're looking at everything on the surface level of, look, this is how I vote, this is how I vote, this is what I think about war, this is who I support in war and stuff like that. If we're just looking on the surface, we're never getting to the real motives that are underpinning, you know, what is making somebody side this way or this way. But I ultimately do believe, and I've got friends, you know, who have all sorts of different views, and I see the goodness in all of them. So yeah, Venus trine Chiron, Jupiter sextile Chiron. I really believe in this week, you know, before or actually coming into the election, the week of the election, I actually think people really are intrinsically good. There's a few bad eggs here and there, but I really do believe that people are wanting to heal and live in a world that's healed. 4th of November, then Mars comes into Leo. We're a bit prouder, a bit stronger. And the Sun trine Saturn, we're feeling more motivated to be adult and to make a decision and to take responsibility for our decisions. And then on the 6th, there's no major aspects on the 5th apart from moon ones. But on the 6th, we've got Mercury in a trine with the North Node. So there's information coming out. Maybe clearing a path for us. I don't think it's going to be clear for a really long time, but on the 6th, there is Mercury trine the North Node. There is information about the way ahead. There's a lot of information coming out. So let's have a look into week 2 then. And this is the one where I think people might be feeling a bit cold and disconnected. Venus going into Capricorn can assist with that. I'll put my hand up. I've got Venus in Capricorn myself. Venus is quite serious here. She relates in a slightly formal way, often, and very polite way. But as we start this week, we've got these Venus. Look at all these Venus energies. Now, I've included some not very common aspects because I just noticed there was a theme going on with Venus, and there weren't that many aspects in week 2 because week 1's got them all basically. But on the 8th, Venus is in conjunct to Uranus. So what does that look like? So Venus is here, Uranus is there. So it's 150-degree aspect. They are still working together. They're not very comfortable together. They're not quite opposed to each other, but they're definitely not trying each other. So it's a working relationship, but it's uncomfortable and it's jagged. So Venus and Uranus. Venus is about relating, and it's generous energy. It is wanting to connect. And yet it's not quite connecting. And Uranus is a bit of a disruptor. Uranus, values the truth, values change, values movement, values ingenuity and all things weird and wonderful. And Venus is actually kind of a traditional, really. Venus is loving and yielding. She doesn't need things to be new and exciting necessarily. So this is a bit uncomfortable. How can we connect? It almost feels like we can't connect. We can't connect unless we're being different, or so I see that as a bit of a disconnect. And then on the 9th, Venus is square Neptune. Now the truth is Venus is already square Neptune for a good week, or a good 4 days before and so many after, but this is at the epicenter of the square. Venus square Neptune, this is exactly when it's happening on the 9th. And then we don't know what to believe. It's almost like we're looking over our shoulder. We're wondering who we can trust. We want to connect. We want to really, really connect to people. And yet maybe our ideals are stopping those connections because we've got an idealistic idea of how things should be, and then we've got the reality of the person in front of us, and then we're thinking, oh, you just don't match up to my ideals. Because how can you have relationships with people where you are holding these high ideals over people that they can't possibly reach? And it also, I think, can speak of not loving yourself fully. So the 11th, the 8th and 9th of November are really sort of disconnected. And then Venus goes into Capricorn and she's not as warm or fun or as available as she was in the sign of Sagittarius. And then the day after, Mercury's in a square to Saturn, which is effectively cutting communications or making communications very formal. We might get a lot of, sorry, that's my alarm clock going off. Whoops. Oh, hang on. Oh dear. One sec. Sorry about that. I set alarms to warn me to stop recording because I need to prep for a client. Oh dear. So anyway, I know I've got a client soon. So Mercury in a square to Saturn is, I think there's going to be a lot of communications coming from governments or authorities. That's a Saturn component, and obviously Mercury is the message. But they are formal. They are terse. They are possibly a bit angry, possibly a bit cold, possibly a bit dismissive. It feels, with Venus in Capricorn, Mercury square Saturn. That feels it doesn't feel very warm or easy. And then the 14th, we've got two different aspects going on. We've got Venus in an inconjunct with Mars. These are also known as quincunxes, by the way. So Venus, where's Mars? Oh yeah. So by that time she's connecting to Mars in a 150-degree angle. So it's very difficult to know which energy we're going to be using. Are we going to be yielding and kind and compassionate, or are we going to be slightly challenging, slightly more direct, slightly more thrusting in how we're relating to people? And then finally, Mercury in a semi-square with Pluto gives a real sense of frustrations with communications. It just feels like everybody, as they're communicating with each other, feels like the other person is trying to manipulate them. So I really do think that we're feeling cold and disconnected in week 2, and that what we're really being called to do is to be more patient. And there's a lot of Venus energy here. It's important to honor ourselves, but how can we be a bit more loving towards the people that we don't get on with? How can we be a little bit more understanding and recognize that we all get to have a say here, and we all need to find a way to work together somehow. So I do think things are going to get a little bit edgy in week 2, and disconnection is the word that is really coming to mind for me. As we head into week 3, you'll see that everything I've highlighted here, because everything seems like a really big energy. And so this was the week that I said it feels like it's tensions, movements and disruptions, and that these tensions might very well bring out the best in us. So even though it sounds like a tense week ahead, that's not to be feared necessarily, because we might be kind of shaking ourselves free of whatever mind spells we've been under, and I think anything that comes in and separates us from each other at its core is some kind of mind virus, because humans are meant to get on together. I think we are naturally collaborative, and you might not see it so much in your everyday life, but when there's an emergency, when something goes wrong, humans, they work together, they come together. There's a really touching, and I know it's an advert, and it was made by some very cynical marketeers, no doubt. And it was for, I think, some breast milk ad from years and years and years ago. And there's all these parents, new parents at a park. And I'll see if I can find it. And if I can find it, I'm going to post it in my community notes. But, there's the nursing mums, and then there's the helicopter mums, there's the crunchy granola bar mums who are all about health and what they put in their baby. Then there's the mums wearing their babies in slings. There's the business mums who can't understand why people get nothing done with their babies in their posh prams and stuff. Then there's the stay-at-home dads, and then there's the lesbian mums, and there's like this view of all these different mums all kind of jeering at each other and getting angry with each other and all piling in for a fight. And then all of a sudden, one of the prams gets pushed accidentally while they're having a ruckus, this great big parental ruckus, and this pram rolls down a hill, and this baby is going to absolutely get mangled at the bottom, and all of a sudden you see the fear in everyone's hearts, and they all run to save the baby. All of the mums, all the dads, they're all running to save the baby together. And that's what humans are. I really think that cynical advert really picked up on something core. We are there for each other, and it's just whatever mind virus we're in, whatever identity issue we've got because we've identified with a particular way of thinking, that's what's separating us. And so, yeah, I think this week 3 is going to shift us. Venus in a square to North Node, we're not relating to each other. We're not relating to our future. We're wondering, how the hell have I ended up here? What am I doing here? The full moon in Taurus, like if we have a look, coming into the full moon in Taurus, the moon is going to be in a conjunction with Uranus. I mean, that's going to blow things up for sure. That's a very, very strong and reactive day. the 15th. And then, leading on to the 17th, where the sun is in exact opposition to Uranus. Again, that level of reactivity is not going to abate. But with that level of reactivity, when things are in our face, I think we do have things like so sharply in our face that, we might even have the presence of mind to question, what is my part in this? What am I doing to for this to continue? Where is my part in this? This can't just be everyone else, because if you do think everything else going on around you is because of everyone else, you're going to be lonely. You're going to be disconnected. We all make mistakes. We're all human. So yeah, really, really big days. And then the sun in a trine to the North Node is helpful. Though, if we're feeling jangled, the Mars in a trine to the North Node could fuel us up to take action about things. So, all of these really good aspects can have sort of real positives and also negative flip sides to them, because we might feel like, okay, I can see what I need to do. And we might be seeing what we need to do whilst being really outside of our normal frame of reference. The 18th, Mercury opposite Jupiter, like, where are we getting our information from? How do we know it's true? So if we can't verify exactly where our information is coming from, why would we ever chastise somebody else who's getting their information from somebody else? If you can't be 100% sure, and you can never be 100% sure of information as it's presented on the internet, unless you're there. Even when you're there, like, you probably have moments where, you're talking to your partner and you're falling out for some reason, and you cannot believe you're in the same conversation because the way they're seeing it is completely opposite to how you're seeing it. I know that one. So yeah, the 18th, I think, could be a very, very confusing day. And then I think things are starting to move. The sun in a trine to Neptune, we are needing to think in terms of peace. How can we be peaceful about this? How can we move forwards as adults? How can we be peaceful? Mercury trine Chiron, how can we heal with our thoughts and our communications rather than rip each other apart with othering and you did this? And then, and I'm not saying that to trigger you, by the way, just in case you're triggered. We're all at this game. Every single one of us on this planet has, at some level, got involved in an identity that is ruling their life. Then we've got the Pluto ingress into Aquarius, which I've already spoken about, and the sun going into Sagittarius. So the energy is shifting on from then. And then the sun in a sextile to Pluto. So like week 3, I do think there are big disruptions and tensions, but right at the end, I think things get moving. And thank goodness. And then week 4, it's a bit calmer. And that's why I said, we're centering, we're healing, we're norming. Venus sextile Saturn, helpful. We are relating as grown-ups. We are wanting to be practical. We are maybe putting our othering aside from each other so that we can just build what we need. The sun in a trine to the North Node. We can sense our new direction, and we can align with it. And then we're feeling more aligned, as the sun goes into a trine with Mars. Venus in a square to Chiron can bring up some insecurities, but we're heading in the right way, in the right direction. And Mercury in a semi-sextile to Venus right at the end of the month, I think is really helpful. It gets things moving. We're talking, we're relating, we're starting to move forwards again. So yeah, a very big month indeed. So thanks once again to everyone that supports this channel. I feel quite exhausted after talking about those energies. And like I said, I will be breaking them down even more with the moon movements on a weekly basis in this month ahead, and also doing it on Aries, Taurus, Gemini, right the way through the zodiac according to your sun sign, your moon sign, or your ascendant. But I hope that's helpful in understanding that, we are all subject to being misinformed. We're all subject to making mistakes. We're all subject to getting emotional about the decisions that we're involved in, and also getting emotional about the decisions that other people think differently on. But does that make the other person evil or not? I don't think it does. Obviously I'm not condoning anything, whereby somebody is deliberately trying to hurt or harm another person. Absolutely not. But, I think we are all in the same boat. And I hope that this forecast goes to sort of explain how some of these energies are arising, which weeks are the slightly difficult ones, and where you might want to think ahead and bring some support to you, get some support. Right now, I think what we all need is one or two really good detached friends who can help us unravel things and who have the maturity and the strength to be able to say, I don't think you're listening to yourself right now, and say, look, it's fine. We're going to get through this. I do think as we come to the end of the month, we're going to be more practical. So there you go. Anyway, lots of love to you. If I can be of any help, get in touch. All of my details are below. As ever, much love to you, and hopefully connect with you real soon. Bye for now.